A black magician named Daryl decides that she needs to hire an assistant. Turning a book with a variety of offers, she wondered that she would like to have something worthy of a true magic. For example, golem or hargul. Seeing how expensive it costs, Daryl could not restrain her astonishment. She realized that if her assistant is too weak, it would not benefit. After all, other magicians will look at her hanging. Daryl believed that her assistant should represent black magic with dignity. Closing the book, Daryl decided to attract a goblin or devil's magician, intending to replace it later. For a long time, the girl called the monster delivery company. It is worth noting that Daryl had her own magic shop, where she was now. The girl was outraged that she was about to send mucus, because she was a dark magician. The girl believed that her assistant should be at least a kobold or fairy. So Daryl decided to immediately return the mucus without any payment. At this point, Mucus entered the store and reported that he had arrived from the monster store to order. Daryl apologized to the mucus, explaining that there was an unfortunate mistake. Meanwhile, the mucus was confidently introduced to do everything that depends on it. Clem seemed very attractive, Daryl. She even forgot her desire to give up for a moment. She approached the mucus and wondered if he could be a wise man. Daryl first stuck her finger at the monster and then hit him with his fist. Suddenly, Daryl felt dark laziness. This feeling seemed dangerous. While the mucus was recovering from an unexpected blow, Daryl plunged into her own reflections. The girl asked the mucus what he had, to which he seems to have replied that she reached only the 2nd level. Then Daryl wondered what special skills he had, and mucus reported that no. The monster assured that the main thing is motivation. Therefore, Daryl decided to interview. The slippery creature settled on a chair, determined to answer all the questions of Daryl, and successfully passed the interview. The girl, unlike this, initially lived on the basis of mucus characteristics. Therefore, the racial level of mucus is 2, without skills. Magic force is unknown. Closing her face with a tablet, Daryl realized that she simply could not use this mucus. Meanwhile, Mucus decided to demonstrate his strength. He strained the biceps and stated that he could carry things. In this case, Daryl decided to conduct an experiment. She took the mucus for the cheeks and began to stretch them. She realized that she just couldn't stop. She also urged herself to calm down and not allow the mucus to overshadow her emotions. Daryl realized that if she chose someone with similar features, then other magicians are not recognized. However, Daryl was amazed at how much this mucus could stretch. In the end, the girl dealt with the monster. At the same time, mucus remained in this state a few more moments before returning to its original appearance. Was stunned. She realized that she could not give up this call, so she decided to accept it. Soon, Daryl was already sitting at the table, holding her head with her hands and thinking that she finally accepted the call this time. Since the black magician hired this slippery, Daryl believed that it should be a good reason. Some assured that Daryl admires sweet things, despite the fact that she was a black magan. However, at this moment, the girl did not give rest, that she just couldn't stand it anymore. At that moment, Daryl announced that the girl was going to undergo a medical examination. She approached the mucus and asked him to raise her hands. The mucus obediently conquered and raised his hands. Carolina conducted this review, hoping to find out why she chose this boy. Besides the fact that he is sweet and surprisingly gentle, the girl tried to calm down again, reminding herself that it was only a medical examination. She once again clasped the mucus, which again caught him by surprise. We'll contact this item to find any reason for hiring this guy. Suddenly, the girl felt that the mucus was a little cool, so she decided that she would just relax when the mucus was nearby. In this case, Daryl made a decision. We think there is nothing wrong with using a cooling device, even if you are a black magician. In this case, the girl could simply say that she rented the air conditioning. After completing the so-called medical examination, the girl began to look for an excuse to touch the mucus. While mucus did pollution in the workshop, Darila, the girl was thinking in agony, trying to come up with something. She realized that the mucus was so cute that she simply did not survive if she did not touch him. But what if she already conducted a medical examination? Suddenly, a brilliant idea flashed in her head. She realized that he could simply give a difficult task. Then the girl will certainly want to watch the sweet helper while he works. Without thinking for a long time, Daryl began to realize her plan. She went to the office and asked the slug if she was in her room. He answered in the affirmative. Then Daryl ran her finger on the surface, hoping to find a mucus and squeeze it for her negligence. The girl's finger was only shining. It did not even have a dust. Daryl was surprised and could not understand how this child was able to clean everything so perfectly. without leaving any trace. In this case, the girl decided to take extreme events and arrange a real test of black magic. Washing her fingers, she created a barrier right in his way, causing the Slim to stumble and let in a box with flowers. Landing, the Slim looked over the drawer and then looked at Darilla with sympathy. Instead, she was satisfied with her success. Fun calling the mucus unreasonable, she again began to squeeze it. After so many feelings, the girl wondered why it was the mucus who decided to work in this store. Then the mucus got a special scroll out of his pocket and began to read it. He argued that he was fond of corporate culture and empathy of Darrett. However, she did not understand what Slime was telling her. In contrast, Slime argued that she was seeking to develop with this company. Here is his reasoning. Then Daryl decided to ask another question. She asks, "Slime, what is your corporate culture?" Her question was caught by a Slim by surprise. He was just silent, not knowing what to answer. The girl noted that if the Slime does not answer this question within 3 seconds, something interesting would happen. Meanwhile, Slime feverishly tried to find the information you need on his piece of paper. As Daryl finished the countdown, the Slim had already poured sweat. He was still unable to find the answer to the question, and Daryl noted that this store lacks corporate culture, after which he again began to squeeze the Slime. Slime, in response, only called Daryl Liss for such actions. Subsequently, the store took up all the cracks and corners. This time he just leveled, leaned against the surface and peered into the cracks, carefully cleaning them. He returned, exhaling hard after exhausting, and again accepted his former state. He watched this with a deep surprise. The girl, of course, knew that mucus could change the shape, but considered this ability to be in vain. Only now did Daryl realize how elastic and variable can the structure of this mucus be. Daryl asked his partner if everything was fine with him, which he only answered yes. In this case, the girl asked him to tidy up all the contents of the box. The Slim began to climb into the drawer, and when he completely fitted inside, Daryl closed the door with his leg. Lime immediately began to knock on the door, stating that he could not get out until Daryl kept the door with his foot. Then the girl apologized and explained that the mucus could not come out simply because the door had jammed. After these words, Daryl removed her leg and the door opened. This mucus dropped out of the box with crying eyes. However, she felt joy because she had the opportunity to touch the mucus again. The girl undertook to encourage her partner and asked him not to cry. In the evening, when the mucus finished his case, Daryl praised him. The girl suggested that the mucus dinner together and became interested in where he would sleep. The royal person noted that this area is dangerous at night, and the only place to sleep in her room unobtrusively hints at the mucus to stay with her. However, the mucus replied that he did not need it. The mucus pulled out his special pot used to sleep. Daryl asked if it was comfortable to sleep in such a pot, to which the mucus replied that this pot was so strong that even if the dragon came on it, it would not break. In this case, Daryl was a little disappointed. After a while, Daryl was already preparing for sleep and sat on the bed waiting for something to happen. Suddenly, they knocked on the door. The door opened with a creak. It was a Slime, and something clearly worried him. He explained that he could not find his tears pot, so he asked Daryl if she saw it. Daryl replied that she did not remember that she would see him somewhere. On the other hand, to completely destroy the mucus membrane, you can add a ghost spirit to the deck, because it is at this time that ghosts usually appear. From these stories, the mucus membranes were already hiding from fear. However, she spread the bed for him and suggested that the mucus membrane be spent on this bed. These words pleased the boy. The mucus membrane thanked Darilla and climbed under the bed. Daryl was surprised to ask the slug if he was approaching a place under the bed, to which he replied that it was really wonderful. However, the girl noted that there is too tight and mucus should not be forced. Slide explained that he likes tight places. Daryl was upset. Again, she failed to touch the mucus membrane. The next day, Daryl sat down at her table again and plunged into thought. She wondered that the mucus membranes were fond of tight places and realized that she had calculated. She had to take into account this feature, paying attention to the clue of the plate. Then Daryl decided to repel the mucus membrane of the bank from the harshness of modern society. Subsequently, the girl clicked her fingers again, and mucus gave up a new spark. When Daryl looked at the place where the mucus should lie, she saw only a moist spot. Daryl was scared and hoped that it was only a joke. She did not understand whether there was such a spell at all, even if it is true. Could it happen because it was mucus? Daryl ran to a wet place left after mucus and only hoped that it was just a joke. The girl suddenly saw the mucus reflection, but at first did not give it. At the same moment, her teammate fell from the ceiling right on her. The mucus understood where he got. Immediately began to get out of Daryl. Having apologized, he explained that he had unexpectedly stuck on the ceiling. Instead, she looked at the mucus membrane through tears, full of anger, which scared him. The girl rushed to embrace the mucus membrane. In the meantime, the old man laughed and said he was just joking. He explained that the boys did not interfere with the return of work if they don't like them. These words were surprised by Daryl. And the old man added that he is a master of Gollum and has his pride. Vero also assured the mucus so that he would not worry, continuing to apologize. He remained a little in the arms, after which the mucus turned to the girl. The girl, for her part, felt only the joy that her mucus was safe. So, Daryl is a black sorceress that staged her shop on the top of the rock. Although she loves beautiful things, her pride, like a black magic, prevents her from being honest. Favorite food and mucus. One night, Daryl reflected that recently, when mucus does her job, she has a decrease in the opportunity to touch him. She already used magic, so she just didn't know how to get out of the situation. Suddenly, a knock on the door came again. It was another mucus that he read a scary book and could not sleep now. He asked his mistress to allow to spend the night with her. Joel's joy did not know the limits. She just set one condition. The Slyn cannot be sleeping under the bed. Slyn himself noted that he liked to sleep next to the girl. Nothing could be done, so Daryl suggested that the mucus come to the girl. Then the mucus rushed into her arms, but it did not delight the girl. Everything was not so easy. The mucus actually slept peacefully under the bed, and everything that happened earlier was just a dream of Daryl. Mucus and Daryl sat down to have breakfast. The girl put dishes on the table. Mucus thanked her and immediately began to eagerly absorb the food. Daryl noticed it and asked the mucus not to eat everything right away. After that, the girl said she was about to go shopping later, so she asked the mucus that he would like to eat. To which the mucus replied that he wanted to taste the marmalade. Such a request was a little surprised by Daryl. Realizing that she does not have to cook marmalade, Daryl suddenly had a brilliant idea. She called to Slip to herself and confessed that she received something from the guest yesterday. Supporting in words, the girl stretched out a small bag and offered to take it. Looking in the bag, the mucus saw a mountain of marmalade. However, she noted that the mucus now has marmalade, which he adored. Seeing how this gift brought him joy, Darrero was also happy and reported that she needed to leave for a short time. She left, and the girl asked the mucus to stay in the store for a while. The mucus obeyed and waved Daryl for goodbye. The girl left, and the mucus, looking into the bag, dancing joyfully, pulled out the marmalade. Without a second, the mucus immediately put the marmalade to his mouth. Something clearly went wrong. The mucus shuddered with the whole body when he ate a piece of marmalade that Daryl gave him. In fact, he looked at the mucus at this point. What did the mucus think about while eating and working? This issue was steadily spinning in Daryl's head. At this point, the mucus turned to his mistress. Seeing the girl, he rushed to her into the arms. Mucus noted that Daryl should wait for the work and then leave. In the end, everything happened as Daryl, slime, and rat thieves. The next day, Daryl noted that the numbers in the last 3 days do not coincide. It was quite interesting and amazing because it testified that there was a thief in the store. There was no doubt, and in the meantime the mucus was also sneezing, so the girl thought about when the theft was, during the store or after closing it. Suddenly, Daryl saw a rat with a purse on his back. It turned out that theft is going on right now. The girl was shocked, seeing the rat stolen. It was too bold. Only mentally asked for a slug, who carelessly sang and sweep into the store. Pay attention to a rat that quietly stolen behind his back. Daryl was aware of the problem, but did not want to touch the rat or use magic. So, she decided to entrust the matter of mucus. Without thinking for a long time, Daryl warned the listener of a rat thief behind him. The mucus turned, saw a rat, and Daryl immediately ordered him to catch the thief. The mucus stopped in place. Daryl, watching her assistant, even wondered if everything was fine with him. Suddenly the mucus rushed on the rat rapidly and knocked it down. He stood up with a joyful exclamation, holding a rat in his hands, announced that he had caught the thieves. But the rat was not going to give up. Gathering the strength, he opened his mouth, ready to bite mucus. The thief grabbed his teeth with a mucus that was frightened and fell on the floor, and the rat rushed. At this point, he rushed to the mucus to ask if everything was fine with her. Although mucus said that everything was well with him, Daryl noticed his tears. At the end, Daryl realized how fragile this mucus was, and also a special reception. The next morning, Daryl woke up from the noise outside the window. She did not understand what was going on there. Going to the balcony, The girl saw an amazing picture. A drop of mucus performed a lot of mucus. While Daryl was surprised why this was the occupation. This time, the mucus began to perform push-ups. Daryl decided that the defeat from the rat was so struck by the mucus that he took up the training. Lime had no much success in push-ups, so he went to the press. It was not easy to make mucus, but he tried hard. He considered the situation and realized that the most important in such a situation is the feeling of mucus. At this point, the mucus began a new exercise. Daryl was interested in watching, without realizing what mucus plans to do next. In a moment, the mucus grew to a huge size, which caused admiration for a girl who observed this sight. He did not even realize what this oisin did, because he increased incredibly. And here one girl decided to jump and grasp the mucus. Not long thought, she climbed through the resistance and fell directly on the mucus. Now Daryl has only one thought in her head, as she justified for her actions. The girl's plan did not work as she hoped. She fell on the mucus, jumped instantly, and flew into the bench with a crash. So Daryl was defeated while the mucus membranes were surprised to watch everything that happened. Shortly. The next day, the mucus began to look for a cockroach in the store, but eventually lost it from its field of view. However, the cockroach did not escape to the street. When the mucus spoke about it, Daryl, he was alarmed. Morality was that the mucus membranes were reminded of its importance, but he was still in a hurry because of the lost cockroach. The mucus was silent, so the girl decided that today everything. She stated that if the mucus does not catch this cockroach, there will be no dinner. These words horrified mucus. Daryl believed that the search would be difficult, but the girl was certain that the mucus would cope with the task. Daryl herself decided to climb up. She entered her room, went to bed, but suddenly heard Churchit. It scared it. When she paid attention to the curtain, she realized that Churchit was coming from there. It turned out that the mucus really lost the cockroach, and it was suddenly angry with Daryl. The girl realized that now she would not be able to fall asleep. She began to blunt her foot on the floor, angry on the plate for not causing the cockroach. At that moment, a joyful slime ran into the room, informing that she had caught an insect. Hearing this news, a smile immediately shone on a rose. Meanwhile, Slime showed the Daryl's cockroach and added that it was he who caught this insect. Seeing the cockroach, Daryl was soured. At the same moment, a loud women's cry came in the store. Slime and Daryl went for dinner. Slime ate, and Daryl only sat at the table. Surprised, he asked the hostess why she did not join the meal. Daryl replied that it was simply not hungry. The next day, Daryl decided to try to prepare soda jam. The girl has already started working actively. It even had special shapes from amulite. She only had to prepare lemon juice and gelatin. After that, it poured the resulting mixture into the mold and cooled it. Finally, marmalade was ready. Daryl was preparing this marmalade, imagining what surprise it would appear on the face of mucus when he tasted it. Daryl did not even know that mucus could know something about gas drinks. The girl was too shy to confess that she was preparing marmalade, but looking forward to when she could give his mucus. Soon Daryl met mucus and greeted it on a good morning. The girl said she received a little marmalade from another client again and handed over a bag of mucus. The mucus thanked Daryl and accepted the bag, and then on a Daryl who stood on the other side of the room, waiting. The girl asked a slippery friend to taste one candy. Mucus thanked Daryl and gladly sent a piece of marmalade to his mouth. After trying the candy, the mucus felt unforgettable. He still said that he really liked the marmalade. Daryl was delighted that mucus had appreciated her marmalade, and expressed his intention to inform the client that the delicacies were delicious. She confidently stated that the client would definitely bring marmalade. Hearing these words, the mucus could not decide whether to rejoice or not. Daryl and mucus. At night, when the mucus, as always, slept under the bed, Daryl, the girl, woke up. Daryl's leg slightly slid to the floor, and the mucus immediately noticed it and began to rub on her leg. When he moved away from the room, the mucus heard some Thark coda behind the door, but did not leave the room. The next morning, Daryl asked the mucus to approach her for a minute. Styral, holding a bag in her hands, reported that the client had gave her jams again, and this time with a fruit taste. In contrast, the mucus guessed that his hostess had prepared this marmalade last night and asked about it, causing silence in the store. Panic engulfed him, thinking that his lie was exposed, and everyone already learned about everything. Daryl really lingered through mucus. As it turned out, mucus simply recognized the aroma that remained from the previous night when Daryl was cooking. It was puzzled. Subsequently, Daryl realized that black magician. Daryl realized that he should find a way to persuade the mucus to change his mind. At this point, the mucus thanked Daryl for marmalade, and that inspired him to start acting. He noted that she did not prepare this marmalade specifically for him, because otherwise it would be a waste. Daryl assured that she only explores complex magic that turn Manu into a semi-hard state. This process creates a jelly with sugar. At the same time, the girl noted that after the use of these jelly beans can remain a little magical energy, because it is a side result of sorcery. This creature did not pay attention to it and still began to eat Daryl orange jam. However, Daryl was only half pleased that she was still able to get out of this situation. Therefore, jelly marmalade, created by Daryl, is not a unique way to tie friendship. Although their use will not cause special events, they will warm your soul. Daryl and Aslam decided that the store would not work today. In the morning, Daryl woke up and realized that she had fallen until late. At this point, he just went into the room and asked his mistress if she was fine. Daryl replied that everything is well with it, but today the store will not work. This mucus realized the situation and decided to leave the girl's room, adding goodbye that they would still meet. After the mucus disappeared, she decided to look into her book under the name How to Create a Cure for Her Illness. Over time, the girl's condition worsened. It turned out to be completely stationary and just lay on the bed. All he tried to do is find out why the girl is sick. She assumed that it could be because she was late to sleep. In view of this, Daryl decided that she needed to eat something nutritious. However, she lacked the strength even for cooking. Suddenly, a knock on the door, which then opened, and a mucus hand appeared in the room. Entering the room with a cap on his head and plate in his hands, he announced that he had prepared a girl rice porridge. Seeing that mucus had prepared for her, Daryl was pleasantly surprised. At the same time, this mucus noted that the porridge turned out to be delicious. Daryl looked at the plate and noticed that it was not only porridge but also jam and candy. She gently stroked the slippery of a particular creature, expressing gratitude for the food, and confessed that she was feeling a little better. She was ready to try colds that were not too effective and treated the mucous membrane of his favorite food. The girl assured the mucous membrane that she really got better. Daryl decided to train at the hospitality with mucous membranes. The next day, she gave him a questionnaire. The girl asked a variety of questions, and the mucus answered. She asked him to show which of these plants is of high quality. Slide indicated that on the left is a high-quality plant, and on the right, a common. She praised the mucous membrane for his knowledge and asked if he knew the difference in the effectiveness between these two types of plants. The mucous membrane replied that a high-quality plant has better efficiency. Instead, the girl noted that it was almost the right answer. In this case, Daryl suggested that hospitality practice with the Slim. Daryl will take on the role of the client, and Slime will become a seller. The girl stood at the entrance to the store and turned to a Slim. Lime joyfully ran to the guest and asked what could come in handy. In addition, he noted that one plant costs 30 gold coins. Daryl slowed down the Slim, because she has not yet decided to buy plants. The girl asked her to show her ordinary and high-quality plants in turn. Slime understood everything and began to run behind the plants. Without delay, he brought the girl the right plants. She was surprised how quickly the Slime fulfilled her request, and wondered. Slime replied that for 2 bouquets it is necessary to pay 65 gold coins. Looking at Seema, Daryl noticed that he looked extremely joyful. Then the girl asked the Slim to bring her 3 leaves, 3 high-quality plants and 2 ordinary. She also added that if the Slime does not handle in 20 seconds, she would receive a fine. Alive was clear and immediately began to look for the order of Daryl on all shelves. Soon he showed all the girl and had time for time. Daryl praised the Slim for his wonderful work. The girl wondered how much it costs. This question was caught by a Slim by surprise. When Slime realized that she had made mistakes, she began to announce it again. In fact, the girl was very pleased with his miss. She realized that she would now be able to use it in her favor. In mucus. The next day, the mucus was engaged in magic. He pulled his hat, took a stick, and began to whisper. Shouting something powerful, Mucus directed her stick to Daryl's bench, but nothing happened. This time Daryl appeared and asked for a Slim whether he planned to accidentally blow up their store. Slime, not noticing the mistress, rushed to her and confessed that he began to study magic. Daryl was amazed hearing this, because the Slim has no mana. Slime said he received a little mana, eating jelly beans. This statement was even more stunned by Daryl. Everyone assured that jelly beans are only food, and theoretically they cannot increase manu. However, Daryl realized before she had completed her opinion. We recall how they warned Slim that after consumption of the mammal tincture, which she prepared to him, her body may remain in her body. It was at that moment that the girl realized that she was guilty of it. Meanwhile, Alan said that after he examines a large fireball, his next purpose would be a tornado, and then he will study a meteor. Daryl listened to the plans of the Slim and realized that it was bad, because without man, he could do nothing. When the girl decided to get out of the situation somehow, she asked the Slim if he knew that magic depends not only on mana. After all, she still needs certain abilities for witchcraft. Slime is upset from these words. The girl felt his mood, though she did not seek to offend him. She noted that the Slim has a slight tendency to magic. These words cheered him up. At this point, she realized that nothing could be done, and now she would have to take responsibility. Therefore, the girl decided to teach the Slim some things. These words caused him true joy, and he sincerely thanked his mistress for it. After a long thought, Darrow decided to teach Seema magic. She began by giving him a book with magical knowledge. However, the magic of the site was dangerous. Sudden Sim said he could not read. Harry and Slim's story. One evening, Daryl decided to tell a scary story. He said that a ghost had once lived under the bed, and later Slime also turned into a ghost. Even before the girl finished the story, he was already trembling with fear. At that moment, it was time to go to bed. He quickly wished the slurry for good night, turned away from him, and the widow, who fell asleep. Finally, the girl warned Sina about ghosts, especially those who live under the bed. Daryl only wanted the Sin to go to bed next to her, not under the bed, as always. The girl was convinced that today she would surely fall asleep with the mucus. Already mentally, she asked the mucus to crawl into her arms, but he seemed to tremble somewhere in the room. Suddenly, the girl heard Lizoon pulling the drawer and said that even in the drawers, ghosts could appear. After that, Daryl noted that Lizoon could sleep with her if he wanted. Alive was so excited that he even released a tear. At this point, Daryl was already thinking about Seema as her Dakenpak. She was still calling a Slim to herself. But suddenly something big glowed on the bed. The girl got up to look and saw a box at the other end of the bed. The bed was satisfied with the mucus membrane. The restless creature. It was Daryl's last thought. Threat. The arrival of Pecan 1. The next day, Daryl found that Slyan had already prepared everything before he asked her. This caused him embarrassment when the girl praised Slyman for his excellent work. In this case, Daryl decided to ask a Slim for help. Slime rejoiced that his hostess had asked him, and stated that he was ready to do anything he wants. Daryl also reported that she hired a temporary employee, because she had to leave today. Therefore, the girl asked the Slim to teach this employee everything as his mentor. However, Slime doubted whether he would be able to cope with this task. At this point, a small girl was included in the store. From the threshold, she announced she represents the company Monstra Dot. Her name is Pokon. She is a fairy, and although this day is one, she will still take over the store management. He wanted to introduce himself and added that he was glad to meet her. Pokon looked at the snail quickly, but then proudly looked away from him. Returning to Daryl, she reported that the garbage she had already cleaned before the store. Thank you to the Peconi, because of which the mucus became much annoyed. She stated with a smile that cleaning was her profession. Lime was clearly not delighted with Pecan. He addressed Daryl, saying that he was doing the rest of his own as Sanpai Pecan. This title clearly did not cause the peelers to be delighted. At this point, Daryl was already going to go. Take care of yourself and find friends. Pecan and Slime spent Daryl with a smile, promising to get together. On the left of Peon, she strongly stated that today he is not intended to make new friends. With the expression of fear on the face, the girl stated that today will prove Daryl, which is higher than mucus, and has a permanent position in this store. Tona also added that today will be the last day for Snail. These words made him shudder. Threat. The arrival of Pecan also. At first, Silly asked to take his broom Pecan. However, the girl interrupted him without letting it finish, and noted that he already knew what he was about to say further. He was convinced that Slime would ask her to take a broom and sweep the floor. The Slime was surprised and could not understand how Pecan guessed his intentions. The girl, how did she understand it? However, Pecan stated that she was just a wonderful fairy and could also predict the following words of the Slim. Daryl added that after these words, Slim asked her to collect the garbage and throw it away. Aline was stunned, because it was exactly what he wanted to say. Pecan also added that Slime is now surprised, where she knows it all. The girl claimed that she already knows exactly what this shop needs. The Cap just was silent. Pecan then asked him if he realized how incredible she was. However, Capley only asked her to tell what was happening after harvesting. The questions were knocked down by a girl from the Panther. She ran to the table every time, asking Slyan to wait a little. Seeing the mountain of scattered papers, Pokon spanned. She did not record what to do after cleaning. It became clear that it would be uncomfortable and too cruel to ask Slyan. Carol realized that he should say something convincing. But if she was wrong, we'll lose 3 days of research. A bruise appeared unexpectedly. At this point, Pekon had a brilliant idea. The hero looked out of the table and argued that the mucus forgot what to do after he made money. Pekon assured that the mucus was a little cunning than it seemed at first, and only pretended to check it. It looked pathetic. Alina realized that the Pekon did not know what to do after the search, and therefore decided to reveal the answer. He noted that the next stage is the sorting of the collected equipment. Kona noted that this was exactly what she was about to say. The preliminary tension made the sigh of sigh. She barely coped with this, because otherwise the situation could become slippery and put it in a very uncomfortable position. So, the girl decided that the only thing left was to demonstrate the difference in skill. The Pakon has announced that it was time to end with these baby entertainment. The girl suggested that it was time to compete for a permanent position for cleaning in the store. The appearance of Pekon 3. In this case, the Sine drew the bench with his broom. Mona, watching it, laughed. The girl claimed that using a broom was quite ineffective. Like a fairy, I can handle cleaning much easier. Kona argued that her wings are not just a decoration, and a wind that rises from their stroke is important. The girl waved her wings powerfully, scattering the mucus on the floor. She stated that in the video, it was in this way swept away all the dust. The cleaning of such a large lava occurs instantly. When the mucus flew to the other end of the bench, Panon claimed that all the dust disappeared with him. Instead of asking the mucus how he managed to do it, Pokon insisted that such a weakness as he would never be able to match her. Slime, a hero who had already stood on his feet, had a weak reputation, but still asked him to retreat and give his place, as he was agreed. Slime was not going to give up so easy. He sought to show the girl what contaminated places he could clean. He squeezed through a narrow hole, leaving the crush in a state of complete surprise. The girl could not believe that it was a special mucus ability. She realized that she would not be able to release such a tiny gap. The Pekon came to the conclusion that this mucus was a criminal intention. She was convinced that mucus consciously created this gap. Suddenly, the mucus became amazing, which caused the Pecoons of curiosity. What a form! The girl began to think that mucus was just mocking her. The girl was not going to give up. She stated that she had even more unique abilities, so they continued the competition with mucus. After some time, Darrow returned to the store. She was amazed at what she saw but was in no hurry to respond loudly. Looking at her destroyed shop, Darryl asked Pekon and Slim about what happened here during her absence. However, the Pecoon and the slime were just standing with their heads lowered, looking in the floor. But the girl felt that she would have to talk convincingly with the Slim. One day, Darryl advised the Slim to serve the client on his own. Slime, without hesitation, agreed. At that moment, a customer came to the store. Darryl decided to follow the Slim from the shelter, only wishing him good luck, while the Slim had already rushed to the buyer. The buyer was the girl. When the mucus approached her, he immediately asked what could help her. The purchase saw mucus and was very embarrassed. She felt that he looks quite friendly. The first thing she asked was, "Where's the hostess?" To which the mucus replied that the hostess was not at this time. The purchase realized that the mucus is now responsible for business. Stroking the boy on his head, she was only surprised. The girl began to stretch the mucus, checking his elasticity. Instead, she looked with some dissatisfaction. She did not like how carelessly the girl treated her mucus. At this point, the client wondered in the mucus what he usually did. The mucus replied that it usually tolerates things. The girl wondered if the mucus is strong enough to move her. To which the mucus confidently replied that he could. Hearing this, the girl decided to try. These words were simply angered by Darryl, and it was anger. At that moment, the client had already jumped on the mucus membrane to carry it. Subsequently, the girl and mucus spent a little more time together and said goodbye to each other. Feeling incredible joy, Slippery returned to Darryl and asked if he had managed to accomplish his task, to which Darryl replied that it was not sure. Seeing a dissatisfied face, Darryl still assured Slim that he had managed to accomplish the task, and it brought a lot of great pleasure. He adored food and alcoholic beverages. On the evening of the same day, Darryl and Alcohol gathered for dinner. But everything turned out to be not so easy. The lizard laid out tents around a plate with mushrooms. Darryl did not understand what it could mean, because the lizard thanked for the treat, although 2 mushrooms were still on his plate. Carl was embarrassed, because Mucus stated that he liked to eat everything in a row. The lizard muttered something indistinguishable after these words and did not respond. Daryl noticed that the lizard did not like mushrooms. The girl felt that she was her chance. She intended to come closer to the lizard and touch it as punishment for the unwillingness to eat mushrooms. The lizard firmly stated that she would certainly taste these mushrooms, but the desire to squeeze the lizard again was still obvious, so she asked him not to overdo it. The lizard, on the contrary, decisively stated that she would taste all the mushrooms because she was bold. Daryl was puzzled, because she did not suspect that eating mushrooms needed courage. At this point, Sun has already stuck one mushroom on the fork, and looking at it a little alert, put it in his mouth, twisting with taste. The lizard's facial expression has changed instantly. She was clearly satisfied, though the tear slipped from her eye. Instead, the guy was only upset that the lizard overcame his fears. The girl felt low and decided to take extreme events. At this point, the lizard was happy to ask Daryl if she saw how he ate mushrooms, to which Daryl answered that she was watching everything. Then she took the lizard and hugged it firmly. She began to magnify the slug and squeeze it in arms. After that, Daryl noticed that another mushroom remained on the mucus plate. He reported it to the slurry, who ate this piece. Daryl praised him and raised him again in arms. Trap and lizard. The next day, Daryl asked the lizard to throw away the garbage. Before leaving, the girl warned that it could be dangerous externally, and the lizard must inform her if something happens. Slime understood everything, and Daryl decided to leave him to himself. After the girl left, the lizard began to sweep in the store. Suddenly, he came across a plate lying on the floor. The plate was made of marmalade, made in the form of a lizard. The marmalade lizard, without hesitation, pounced on the plate and ate it. Suddenly, she noticed another plate with marmalade in front. Looking back, the lizard found many plates laid out like a trail. The magician hurried to collect all the marmalade from the plates, forgetting what Daryl told him. One day, the lizard came across an unusual marmalade that lay under the whole design. Looking at this, the slippery glitter struck. He decided to get this marmalade immediately. The study showed that such structures were usually reduced to catch someone. He decided to get marmalade with a broom, avoiding the risk of falling into the trap. He grabbed a broom and ran straight to the trap, not paying attention to where he was going. Hardly reaching the marmalade, the lizard got into a pit covered with leaves. And it was then that the bushes, smiling, came out with a shovel in her hands. The lizard was already sounding to the rescue. Daryl, reaching the lizard, hugged him, and reminded that she warned of the danger from the outside. In fact, she calculated the behavior of the lizard in advance. Instead, the lizard after the incident could not understand who covered the pit with the leaves. And Daryl, who really did, watched silently and assured that she did not know who hid the hole. Beta and Slime. The next day, working in the store, Slime accidentally dropped a box of grains on the floor. It was at this moment that Pokon appeared, as if from nowhere. She was convinced that she witnessed a serious accident, so the girl decided to inform Daryl about it. And this would definitely rely on this slippery situation. Having examined the store, the Pakun realized that there was no Gave here. The girl decided to just wait for him. After returning Daryl, Pakon decided to settle here as a worker. In this case, the Alpanen had to take on part of the work. She mentally asked Daria to return to the store as soon as possible. Time passed, and Pakoni still had nothing to do while she was waiting for it. So she started dancing in place to entertain herself somehow. After a while, the girl sat down and from boredom, began to draw something on the ground with a stick. Soon, Pokon felt drowsiness and decided to lie down right near the bench. Darilova's voice was unexpectedly heard. She warned that sleeping on the ground is dangerous. You can catch a cold. Hearing this, Pokon woke up and was frightened by the sudden appearance of Daryl. Realizing that the girl was returning, Ponon jumped happily and decided to share what she saw in the morning. She noted that the mucus has made a significant mistake, and now valuable goods are lying on the floor. When Daryl looked into the store, she saw only a box with seeds and a clean floor. It was a moment when Pekon realized that while she was sleeping, the mucus simply destroyed all the evidence. On the other hand, Pekoni seemed to be just dreamed of it. She decided to confess to Darilov and apologize. However, the girl was outraged. She decided to remember this day forever. Dungeon and Mucus. One day, the mucus came across the store on something unusual for him. He turned to Darila and asked what it was. She explained that it is just a basement where she stores valuables and data. The girl said she needed to take something there and asked the Slim to take a lantern and go with her to the basement. Although he was afraid, he took the lantern and decided to go down the first. Going down, Daryl asked the sign to be careful, because there were many valuable things around. So, Slime began to inspect the basement and was impressed with the heart. At that moment, Darrow found what she needed. It was a statuette of a golden magical beast. Seeing her, the charter, the sign trembles from fear. The statuette was so frightening that the snail had anxiety. Seeing inside, she told Daryl that it was very dark here. However, Daryl asked the snail to wait a little, and in the next moment, he used magic to illuminate the basement. Meanwhile, Alavi pulled on Daryl and closed his eyes firmly. He only asked the girl to turn on the light faster, not knowing that Daryl had already done it. The girl took advantage of a good moment to hug with mucus. So she turned off her light and said that she did not want to turn on. Over time, when Daryl carefully stroked the frightened face of the snail, she still decided to turn on the light. The girl gave the unrestrained joy that the light was turned on. Meanwhile, he calmed down, and she suggested that he take a statuette and get back to the store. Looking at the broken statuette lying on the floor, Daryl felt despair. Most likely it was a matter of Snail, who accidentally knocked it down in the dark. Training and mucus membranes. Subsequently, Daryl decided to take up the mucus and study of magic. She immediately explained to the slug that he would not be able to arrange a large explosive or something like that from the first time. The girl emphasized that at first he should master the foundations. Then she gave the mucus the first part of the bases. But when he began to study them, he admitted that he could only read this part now. In this case, Daryl decided to discuss the issue of mania today. The girl argued that the basis of magic is the understanding of the universe as a whole. Slim then asked Daryl what the universe as a whole is. People claim that mana is a source of energy to create magic. So there are those who have manu and those who do not have it. For example, elves and gnomes. Their magic depends on the race. The presence or absence of mana is mostly determined at birth, although there are other ways to obtain it. Suddenly, Daryl decided to show the Slim goods from their store called Magic Walnut. The girl explained that the Slim should just eat it. Slim sincerely thanked Daryl for her generosity. However, Daryl noted that this magic nut is not for her, because its cost is too high. Then there was curiosity in the Slim, how much this magic nut costs. Daryl did not open the amount, but the girl noted that for this money it is possible to buy a whole mountain of marmalade. Slime imagined this picture and was amazed. However, Daryl noted that this was just an example, and decided to return to the Manu discussion. After a certain time of research, Daryl summed up the results with words that described the force with which mucus was able to obtain energy from nature. Looking at the mucus, the girl noticed a bizarre face. Realizing that the mucus had just yelled and she noticed it, the girl realized that he was difficult to study. However, Daryl could not but weigh that she was delayed in the lesson longer than she planned. Therefore, Daryl decided to finally deplete the mucus to get as much as possible. The girl announced that she would tell the mucus the story of magic. This story will be long, and the mucus will have to listen to the end. Without spending time, Daryl began to read. She began with the fact that magic originated thanks to the great magician. Subsequently, the mucus was already peacefully blowing the bubbles, sleeping quietly at the table. Suddenly, the mucus woke up and saw a joyous girl in front of him. Seeing the mucus finally, she rushed to hug him, punishing him for falling asleep when she told an interesting story. Magic. After a while, the sign decided to practice. Although he worked hard, Simon ordered himself to focus. Imagine and embody the virtual image of fire. This is how the book was stated. At this point, Daryl went out to the balcony and saw everything with his own eyes. Slime hardly tried to create something unusual. In the end, when Cena's workout was over and he returned to the store, Daryl asked him why he wanted to capture magic so passionately. One of the mucus replied that it was just really cool. Elav confessed that he sincerely seeks to be useful for Daryl. These words were a little embarrassed by the girl. This mucus asked Daryl if he could go to workout. Daryl was surprised that Zion wanted to train again, but the girl did not want the mucus to forget about something important, so she just asked him to be careful. The girl was left alone, plunging into her reflections. Daryl thought of a Slim, who was training lately every day. She regretted him, wanting a mana to appear, and everything turned out. Daryl realized that thanks to such perseverance, if the Slim had a mana, he would have coped with fire for a long time. At that moment, Daryl's gaze stopped on a vessel, in which a rare forest tree was lying, capable of giving manu to anyone who eats it. The girl also remembered the words of Slim that he seeks to be useful to her. This time, Slim continued to train again, but failed again. The boy was already desperate, and tears turned into his eyes. At this point, Daryl's voice was heard. She turned to the Slim and asked if he wanted to take a break. Seeing Daryl, Slime became very joyful. Daryl, leaning to the Slim, said that she had marmalade for him. The girl suggested a little bit of a slice, because he should make more effort. Slime accepted her marmalade and thanked for it. She asked the Slim to eat marmalade, and he fulfilled this request. She waved her magic wand again, and the flame appeared instantly. Initially, Slime did not even realize that he managed to perform the trick. He was surprised, and Daryl, meanwhile, began to clap his palm. Jelly realized that he succeeded, and it brought him a great pleasure. Yo also felt a real pleasure in the help of Jelly because he made a lot of effort. Restaurant and Slime. So today, Slime is preparing a dinner for Dita. Feeling a little surprise, she asked in a Slim that made him do so. Slime replied that he just wanted to give Derrida a little rest, because she always cares about him. Derrida, for her part, noted that it was a little annoying, and she was not sure whether such a responsible task of the Slim could be entrusted. At that moment, the Slime took Daryl by the hand and asked her to look at the yard. Looking into the yard, Daryl was stunned. The Slim built a restaurant there. At this point, the girl realized that now you would not get anywhere from him. Daryl, looking at a decisive mucous membrane, asked what he was going to feed it. Meanwhile, the mucous membrane stretched Daryl. Daryl, having received it, realized that the slug is quite organized and serious. Considering the illustration on the menu, Daryl thought that it was a dark mixture on it. The girl asked if she would use only quality ingredients, without marmalade and other sweets. To which the Slime replied that he would do everything as Daryl wants. In this case, Daryl decided to instruct all the Slim, asking him only to carefully handle the fire. In a few minutes, Slim had already cooked food in a frying pan. Sitting next to the table, he watched the culinary process with interest. He thought that the image on the menu did not cause confidence. However, Daryl seemed that the rest of the Slims acted correctly. Then the girl suggested that the Slim improved the taste. At that moment, the Slime completed the cooking and thanked Darla for patience. In the end, Slima served Daryl on the table vegetable stew. Looking at the dish, Daryl noted that she looks the same as in the picture. The Slime was satisfied with these words and asked Daryl not to force him to blush. Then he turned to Daryl again and thanked her for taking care of him every day. Alim dreamed that one day he would learn to cook as well as his mentor, so he decided to make every effort. These words were surprised by Daryl. Meanwhile, the Slim said that the girl's account is 300 coins. One day, a former client appeared in a bench of magical goods, led by Kiroro. Just after crossing the threshold of the store, she said she had come to meet with a Slim. When the girl entered, the one who worked at the box office greeted her with a smile. He apologized and explained that the Slim is now on a break. She realized that she would also like to touch the Slim carelessly. However, the girl knew it was dangerous, because it was unknown when that annoying client appeared again. It was at this point that the client asked Daryl if she was a black magician. Daryl replied that she is indeed a black magan. The client then noted that she guessed it when Daryl was seen under her eyes, because all the black magicians wear such signs. After that, the girl announced that she was also a magician, a white witch named Shira. At this point, the Darrow turned panic. She understood that if she learns that Service is a black magician, it will put Darrow on a smile. Meanwhile, Guerrero confessed that she was amazed to see the plum in the service of a black magician, given the ominous reputation of Daryl. In addition, Shiraro confessed that she also loves cute things, so the girl thought that she and Daryl could find a common language. At the same time, Daryl realized that this unpleasant situation should be avoided in order not to threaten his reputation with a black sorceress. Daryl noted that Herero was mistaken, because she just started working today. The girl claimed that she did not understand why the store owner hired mucus. She tried to remedy the situation, noting that the same lizards were much better than the mucous membranes, and if she was the owner, she would have hired better. Daryl, no longer withstand the situation, shouted at Sroper to buy something and disappear from her eyes. At that moment, Seema appeared and, turning to Daryl, mistress, announced that the victory belongs to him. Daryl froze with surprise. After that, Aline again turned to Daryl hostess, confessing that she liked everything. At this stage, Daryl has already started the chambers of shame and anger. At that time, Roro, noticing the slippery creature, greeted it. The girl understood everything without words, and looked at Daryl with naive eyes. Roro laughed, saying that she could not believe how Daryl could lie to her. It seemed to her that the whole situation was even sweet. At this point, Daryl could not stand and exploded. The next day, at lunch, Daryl apologized to the Slim and suggested that he play in the yard until she was preparing a lunch. It was the exact step that Slime took. Going into the yard, he held a magic wand in his hand. Suddenly, he noticed some plant behind the bench. Immediately, the mucus began to call Daryl loudly. He immediately ran outside with a pan in his hands, asking for the happening mucus. Seeing the mucus, the girl frozen in surprise. On the other hand, he stated that he had melted. And indeed, he was in a semi-liquid state. People realized that mucus swallowed one of the berries that grew behind a bench. Mucus, for its part, recognized it, and even noted that these berries are delicious. When Sim wondered whether it testified to his evolution, Darrow denied, saying that it means nothing. Instead, the girl worried more about how the mucus would act in this condition. In this case, Daryl decided to take the mucus back to the store. Taking it in her hands, the girl realized how difficult it is to keep him. In the store, Daryl thought about how to return the mucus to his previous state. However, no idea came to her head. Daryl realized that it would be unfortunate if she could not find the right way. She looked at the melted mucus, trying to act, and realized that she had to fix it somehow. Suddenly, Daryl realized that a mucus hardener could use. Without thinking for a long time, Daryl puts a Slim on the table and asks him to wait a little. Pouring the mucus dissolved in hot water gelatin, Daryl added a little starch, which made the mucus exhale with a slight cough. Now you just have to wait a little while the mucus is hardened. Subsequently, the mucus hardened, forming the shape of the ball. He realized that the mucus had hard, but the form was not as expected. Meanwhile, the mucus just had fun jumped in place. In this case, Daryl decided to postpone the case for later. However, for a while, the mucus itself returned to its usual form. The next day, Daryl needed rest, so she stayed in her room. She asked the mucus to look after the store and hold the thief if he appeared. Mucus, having understood its task, carefully took up the cleaning of the store. At this point, a dark figure appeared at the door of the store. At first, the mucus thought it was just a thief, and confidently stated that a stranger was not a level. It turned out to be just a boy. Seeing him, the mucus was surprised. Seeing the Slim, the boy immediately asked if he was here to help and whether he himself. Silly replied that his lady had departed. Hearing this, a stranger who was called Darrow Carls asked what he would do if he had come. In the end, he only reassured, saying that everything was normal and he would take care of it. However, instead, the boy decided to tell Slim something interesting. When the boy confessed that he was a theft, the Slim was full of surprise. Meanwhile, the stranger reached for the bottle on the shelf, saying that he wanted to steal it. The snail rushed after the thief, pleading to stop. However, the stranger stubbornly refused to slow down. However, the mucus does not quench, shouting loudly to the stranger to stop. The stranger had no intention of stopping. He was already thinking about who to sell this nasty substance. It was at this point that Daryl, when he heard the Homer, went out to the balcony from the upper floor. Seeing the girl, the stranger frozen in surprise. Turning to Daryl, the girl said that her assistant grabbed something. Daryl immediately recognized this stranger. He was his older brother. With tears in her eyes, Alcard, Slim, began to assure Daryl that his older brother was doing badly because he stole their jug. She was annoyed that her brother hurts her mucus. The girl asked the mucus to wait below because she decided to deal with her brother. The guy immediately began to make fun of Daryl for hiring mucus. Not understanding how much his sister likes this mucus, he continued to joke. Daryl, in turn, asked his brother to stop. The girl explained that there was an error at the Monster Management Center, and she was too busy to fix it. I claimed that he understands the girl if she was so busy. However, he did not leave the question of where all visitors went, and she, for her part, was only interested in why her brother Vlad decided to come. What Vlad came to find out how his younger sister was about in business. He assured her that he was very worried, because his lovely little sister suddenly left the house. Who asked the girl if she was going to return home? To which Daryl resolutely replied, no. Daryl also thought of how Vlad found her, to which he replied that he had brought him here. The young man noticed Daryl's convicted look. He realized everything, and decided not to tell his sister nothing, because he did not want Daryl to hate him. Vlad then asked if he could visit his younger sister from time to time. Daryl answered him, though with a dissatisfied face, that Vlad has such an opportunity. He suddenly added that he would only come to see the mucus. The guy began to catch with Daryl, not believing that he would really come to her. In such a situation, Daryl decided to remind her to his brother that he had stolen the bank from her, and now he should pay for it. By the way, the amount was $50,000. That's when Vlad could no longer laugh. One day, Daryl faced the problem she told her. She realized that she was serious and asked for Mucus if he knew how to solve it. As it turned out, the problem was that Daryl's store only recently opened, and there were few visitors. But in such a state of business could not remain. Therefore, Mucus decided to make every effort to attract more customers. She realized that she had just escaped from home, and if the store was developing at such a pace, she would probably quickly turn back. It is not easy to climb the top of the rock. Daryl realized that she needed more publicity. In this case, the girl suggested that the Mucus create a brochure. Her idea was so surprised by the Mucus that he did not even understand what it was about. Without thinking for a long time, Daryl sat down for the preparation of the brochure. The first step was to determine the location of the store. At this point, the girl called Mucus. He said that he had completed work on the brochure, holding a picture. Looking at the Mucus image, Daryl was surprised, trying to understand what was drawn to the left. However, Mucus explained that he actually drew a dragon that protects the store on the left. Daryl, in turn, decided to explain the Mucus that nothing was needed. The girl insisted that the Mucus indicates the location of the store and what was sold there. And if you add a dragon, it only scares customers, telling all the slurry. Daryl Yuk, along with her, created a brochure that was approximately imagined using paints. The girl was satisfied with the received brochure and decided to reproduce her with magic. It was at this point that Slime announced that he also wanted to help. She didn't like it. She asked the Slim to draw an illustration for the cover and make it sweet. I was understood and I started drawing a cover. After a while, Daryl used magic to create a few copies of the booklet. Downloading a girl, Slime asked if he completed work on the cover. To which Slime replied that he almost finished. Daryl approached the Slim and pulled out a piece of paper from under him. The Slime was a little upset because he has not yet completed the work. He apologized to Daryl, but the girl noted that what he painted was very sweet. Slime did not even believe the girl's words. At the same time, she noted that this option was a little too large for the booklets, and asked if she could leave this drawing, because Slime made so much effort. Slime gladly agreed. In this case, Daryl Ann left a drawing on her desktop and went to collect herbs with him. One day, Pona returned unexpectedly to take a position at Darilla's store. At the sight of the Pacon, the Slime even jumped out of the fright. Carol only asked the Slin to accept what she was about to pass to him. Kona handed him a rolled paper, after which she quickly ran away, saying that she would wait for a slight in that place. Slime looked at the roll but could not figure out what was written on it. Soon, Pocon was already in the forest of Matango, where she invited a Sleen in her letter. He was thinking about how her past battle with Slim created difficulties for Daryl. However, if the battle takes place in the open area, there will be no problems. Why did this go for a day have it to spend the whole day in this forest? It has passed for a while, and the path has already tiredly curled up with a ball, waiting. Slime has not come to her yet. The girl decided that the victory was on her side, because the Slim never appeared. So she decided to go home. Unfortunately, the girl promised to Slim, which would still make herself know, because he spoiled her today. The girl tried to find the way home from the forest, and without success. Doni was very strange and unclear where to lead the way back. At this time, the girl was holding a lantern. Suddenly the lantern went out, and the girl remained alone in the impenetrable darkness of the forest. Mona was hysteria because the snowman lost a fuel supply in such a place. The girl could not calm down, because her imagination was already painting a terrible monster from a book that appears at night in the forest. At that moment, a silhouette appeared from the bushes. The Pacoon was so frightened that she did not stay on her feet and screamed loudly, seeing this spooky figure. Fortunately, it was a safe Daryl, who when he saw Pacan, immediately asked if everything was fine with her. Hansi and Daryl, Pacan just wept. He was incredibly glad that Daryl found her, because the girl was extremely frightened. Excuse me in front of the Pacon, and explained that the Mucus could not read the letter she gave him. At that moment, the Mucus appeared behind Daryl's back and apologized to the girl. Pacon saw him and began to wipe her tears, claiming that she did not cry at all. Through tears, Daryl added that she was not really frightened, but only accidentally ate a poisonous mushroom. Kona said she could not stop tears, although everything is fine with her, and the mushrooms were guilty of everything. At this point, Sim began to rub his eyes and sobs. Daryl was genuinely glad that she was okay and she was okay, so he decided to go back to the store. One day, Sroro returned to Daryl's store with a gift. The girl asked the boys from the doorstep whether they had lunch. Roro just wanted to have lunch with the boys. Daryl apologized and explained that he had just ate. However, at that moment, Simon noted that he had not had time to have. The boys spread the blanket on the bench and broke up to eat. Shiraro told them that she woke up in the morning and prepared something. Sandwiches in the form of mucous membranes. Lime was very happy to see such sandwiches. At this point, Daryl, not wanting to look less skillful next to Shiroro, stated that she also prepared something. The dish that the mucus first looked at, and then thanked Daryl. She was horrified to see such a reaction from the snail. She clearly wanted more. This time, Shiroro has already started feeding the snail with her sandwiches, and Daryl could only watch, burning from anger. She decided to treat the Slime by stretching his marmalade. Slime felt embarrassment, and Darrow had already asked him to open his mouth wide. Seeing Daryl's face, the mucus has pulled out. At the same time, Daryl tried to convince him that everything was not at all as it seemed. Then the Aurora laughed and said that she noticed the expression of Daryl when she asked the Slim to open her mouth. The girl considered this moment very sweet. In response, Daryl shouted his best that it was not true. After a while, Daryl returned to work. Soon, the mucus noticed something strange on the table, and asked what it was. Daryl explained that it is a metal element used to make weapons. She also added that malicious goblins are increasingly emerging from the forest, so demand for weapons has grown. The girl warned the Slim not to touch this metal element because he was very dangerous. Slime promised the girl not to touch him. However, the element suddenly returned to him again. At that moment, Daryl heard strange sounds. When the girl turned, a real explosion came in the store. We quickly ran to the mucus that disappeared from the field of view, and wondered if everything was fine. The mucus replied that everything was well with him. When the mucus appeared, it looked quite different. His body became metal, and it did not herald anything good. Daryl asked the Slim to stay for a moment and touched him. Realizing that the Slim was no longer soft, Daryl closed her face with her hands. Instead, the slime looked at his hands and realized that he just evolved. Tripped, he started jumping in place. But Daryl asked him to calm down. The girl looked at the mucous membrane in surprise, not understanding how to proceed. At that moment, the mucus spoke to her, stood in front of a stone. When Daryl looked at him, the mucus split the stone in one hand. She was horror. She only wanted the tears to become softer. But she had no idea how it could be achieved now. She could not imagine that mucus was able to break the stone with one hand. After long searches in the books, Daryl's head rose sharply. She did not find a way to return the mucus to his former state. The girl stood numb, not understanding what to do next. Daryl realized that the mucus looked happy now, although in his previous form he felt better. But she was aware that if nothing is done, something could happen to him. So we need to act. Suddenly, metal mucus turned to the girl again, stick and wooden shield. Slime firmly stated that he intended to go to the forest. Daryl could not squeeze what the Slim referred to. Instead, Slime said he was going to fight with evil goblins. The situation was critical because Slime is overly captured by the idea of turning into metal. He considers himself immortal and invulnerable, and even now, it spends power, beating with air. Daryl tried to explain to the Slim that wandering the forest is dangerous. After all, bears live there. Slime stated that he would act when a bear would appear. With these words, he hit himself on his head with a magic wand. Instead, Daryl mentally asked him to wave it. Daryl realized that the situation was bad, because it was worth a moment to turn away, as a slime would immediately retain into the forest. Therefore, Daryl sought to turn the Slim as soon as possible. Suddenly, a great idea appeared in her head. He prepared a lane for a Slim and suggested that he freshen up before going to the forest. Slime agreed without hesitation. Thank you to the girl, Slime drank a drink that Daryl prepared. However, Daryl wondered. Maybe if a Slim had eaten the fruit that melted it, he would have changed. So she decided to create a new cocktail on his basis. After drinking the cocktail, the mucus frozen for a moment, and then it was shaking. And he exclaimed with a questioning intonation. Everyone just became soft again. And Daryl felt the happiest girl in the world. Initially, Slime did not realize what happened to him. He later sat down on the bench, plunging into his thoughts and looking into the void. Daryl looked after him during this time, only mentally. Inspiration in mucus. Since Daryl has hired mucus, a little time has passed, and the forest has been quite safe. So, the girl decided to give mucus another task. After a long thought, Daryl turned to the snail, asking if there was free time in the snail. He turned around, and the girl asked him to go to the forest nearby to gather a certain amount of prey on her own. The blind was happy about this task and confidently stated that he would be able to fulfill it. He decided to get up quickly and asked Daryl to wait a little. After a while, the mucus was ready, but Daryl had several questions. The mucus took with it a whole arsenal. Daryl doubted that it was really necessary, given that the forest is quite close. However, the mucus insisted on what Daryl was doing. Time takes a lot of strength, so Daryl asked if it was on a trip. The girl tried to explain to him that he was just going to the forest. At this point, Tears did not listen to Daryl at all and persistently asked her to pay attention to his sword. In response, Daryl wondered if he listened to it at all. Alive, on the contrary, assured that this sword is called the Excalibris, and thanks to him, he will feel safe, even if he has to defend himself. In fact, the sword was made of paper and was extremely fragile. Meanwhile, Slime continued to tell what he was going to bring with him in the woods. Dalla watched him, smiling happy. This time, Slime showed a girl compass. Della approved his choice because compass is quite useful. Slime explained that following the red arrow, you can get to the desired place. At this point, Del removed his compass back. Slime showed her the following items that he was about to take. These were ordinary iron, but he assured that they pointed in the right direction. She looked at the mucus full of enthusiasm and just remained silent not to interfere with him. He was passionate about his traps and various junk. After a while, Simon announced that he was ready to go on the road. His backpack was so heavy and cumbersome that the mucus could not move it from the place. Unlike mucus, Daryl realized that he had taken too many things with him, and grass and mucus. Finally, before the mucus went into the forest, Daryl asked if he could handle herself, to which the mucus replied that he had an anicap for protection. Then Daryl told him that when he left the store, he should go straight to get to the forest. Zero also asked the hay to collect some herbs on the edge of the forest, noting that she did not go to the forest because it was very dangerous. When the Slim was moving away, Daryl was still worried, because he was very close. Finally, the boys said goodbye, waving each other for goodbye. At the beginning of his journey, he laid fun, singing a song. At once his attention was attracted by a rapid grandmother who flew past. He got his paper sword and tried to lure the grandmother to his blade. In the end, he was able to achieve his goal, so he began to squeeze the insect. After a little time, the mucus stopped for a break. He ate, drank water, and rested to continue the path with new forces. Jumping after a break and picking up a backpack, Slime went on, singing a fun song. He got to the forest soon. In the forest, Slime finally found the necessary herbs, from which he was filled with a joyful mood. Approaching herbs to gather them, Slime suddenly heard strange sounds nearby. Raising his head, he saw a huge beetle with great horns. Soon, Slime returned to a cheerful exclamation shop. Daryl greeted him and immediately asked if everything was fine. The girl suggested to show the Slim his find. After that, Slime began to unpack his backpack. He took out the same Gurkule's beetle he found in the forest. He was undoubtedly not delighted with the appearance of a large horn of a beetle. A moment in the store, a loud woman screaming, and mucus. The next day, Daryl left the store again, instructed all the duties of mucus. He, in turn, watched the store carefully. At that moment, Vlad appeared again, and seeing the Slim, asked if he was alone. Hearing the voice of the authorities, he was immediately scared. Recognizing his brother Daryl, he began to vote that Vlad was dangerous. Vlad asked Slim where Daryl was. He answered this that he was not going to tell him anything. Then Vlad decided to simply wait for Daryl's arrival. Vlad conceived a little fun with the slice. He stated loudly that he planned to steal something, calling himself a villain. Hearing these words, Slime stated that if Vlad dared to steal something, he would surely impress him with magic. This undoubtedly caused surprise because of mention of magical abilities. I decided to find out if mucus could actually use magic because it was a difficult thing. However, the mucus insisted that it was for its strength. Instead, Vlad doubted and wanted to see it personally. In such a situation, Sim decided to get together and demonstrate to the authorities. However, at this point, the guy poked his finger in his forehead, calling a petty. On the other hand, mucus was asked to stay away. I would only twice ask the mucus for the apology for it. Mucus tried to use magic again. But at this moment, Vlad lightly poked his finger in the cheek. Although mucus said all the necessary words, despite the intervention by the authorities, did not sound any sound. Vlad, in turn, laughed at the fact that the mucus remained silent. The laughter of the guy upset mucus, and tears were in his eyes. He, with tears in his eyes, stated that he could actually do it. But Vlad assured the opposite. He was convinced that Sine was not capable of magic. At this point, Daryl returned, and, noticing the situation, immediately asked the authorities what he was doing with her employee. Or Vlad could turn to Daryl. Meanwhile, the girl used magic to lightly push her brother out of the store, Leaf and Mucus. As always, the Mucus is cleaned today and washes dishes. Looking at the Mucus, you notice that today it was cheerful than usual. It made the girl think of what caused his smooth mood. Some Mucus replied with delight that Santa would come to all polite children today, and also give them what they dream of the most. Darrow realized that the reason for the great mood of Mucus is the approaching Christmas. Therefore, the girl decided to make a gift to her employee, and wondered that he had ordered from Santa. Slime replied that he asked Santa Dragon as a friend. Hearing this, Daryl was a little surprised. She came to the conclusion that the Slim liked dragons, and asked if he wanted something else. For example, a giant chocolate tile or a stylish sword. The girl claimed that friendship could not just get as a gift from someone. Slime supported Daryl, and the girl was glad that she managed to change his mind. Slime announced that he was ready to do his best to become a friend of the dragon. Now Daryl realized that she failed to change the mind of Slim. At that moment, the girl did not know how to do. At night, the girl still decided to make a toy dragon for a Slim and finish the work until he sleeps. Suddenly, a joyful Slime broke into the room, reporting that he had finished cleaning the store. Daryl, who was sitting with a toy dragon in her hands, was stunned by such news and only praised the Slim for her perfectly done work. At the same time, Elaine, burning interest, asked Daryl if she believed that Santa was visiting. At that moment, she turned away, trying to hide the dragon from Mucus. The girl assured that Santa loves children, so he will come true, because it is Santa. Then Daryl advised the Mucus to go to bed so that Santa would surely come. Soon, Mucus and Daryl were already in bed. Mucus, however, clearly did not want to sleep. He asked Daryl if he could make a dragon, to which Daryl replied that she was already. He was so fascinated that Daryl was filled with many questions. However, Daryl persistently asks the Slim to fit. In the morning, Slime woke up, and his first thought was Santa. The dragon, on which the Slime was waiting so much, did not appear outside the window. It was very upset by the Slim. At this point, Daryl was concerned about the room and reported that there were troubles in the store. The girl said she found a little dragon near the house. Slime, full of joy from this news, jumped out of bed to see the dragon faster. Going to the balcony, Slime saw in the center of the little dragon, which he immediately liked. Daryl, who stood nearby, suggested that Slim approach and say hello to the dragon. So the Slim went out into the yard and shyly greeted the dragon. The dragon answered Slim as. Elaine believed that the words of the dragon were extremely exciting, although in fact it was Daryl, who, with the help of magic, spoke on behalf of the dragon to the Slim. This time, Simon asked the dragon if he really exists. The dragon replied that yes, they were real, and to confirm it, he suggested demonstrating his wings. After these words, the dragon climbed into the sky, and the Mucus looked at him with delight. The dragon was absolutely convinced that he was real. At this point, he landed and reported that he would spend some time with Mucus today, because he asked him Santa. Dragon named Daryl noted that it was a Christmas gift for Snail for his good behavior. Alan was in the 7th sky from such a gift, so he suggested that the dragon become his friend, and Dragon agreed. After that, Seema began to hug his new friend. On the same day, Mucus began to play with his new friend. The boys staged a thief and hero game. The dragon had the idea to steal all the treasures from the store when no one looks. But suddenly, a brave Mucus appeared and ordered the dragon to stay in place. The shopping defender returned. Set Slime is full of confidence. At that time, the dragon just smiled contemptuously. He doubted that someone was able to stop it. However, Slime denied, saying that the dragon was not lucky because he had a trump card. It was a Mucus ray capable of destroying the dragon. But in reality it was only the imagination of the Slim himself. After this game, Slime asked his friend what they would do next. However, a dragon named Daryl suggested that a Slim rest because the girl was already tired of playing with him. The Slim began to eat, and the dragon sat side by side watching him. This Slime decided to draw until the dragon was nearby. After that, Slime from Darov's road applied magic to the dragon. They rose so high that the eyes of the Slim shined. After that, the boys settled on the edge of the rock on the hill. Slime suddenly asked the dragon if he could become a powerful dragon if he was working hard. The dragon replied that the Slim was not destined to turn into a dragon. These words scared the Slim to the heart. The dragon noted that he had the opportunity to become a powerful dragon. He was eagerly waiting for the moment when the Slim would become extremely powerful and could not wait to see it with his own eyes. In turn, Slime promised Dragon to make every effort. Powerful Mucus. After Christmas, the Mucus continued to do his work at Daryl's shop. She looked at the Mucus and was surprised to see that he was quite calm. The girl thought he would be upset after the dragon's departure. She may not have been the only one who had such doubts. So Daryl decided to ask directly. She wondered in the Mucus whether he was feeling loneliness after his friend left. The Mucus replied that he promised the dragon to become a powerful Mucus. It was at this point that the girl realized what was the matter. As always, the boys prepared for sleep when the night came. Suddenly, Daryl noticed that Slim had taken his box and asked him about it. However, Slim explained that he would no longer use his own. Aline said he became stronger. Hearing these words, Daryl was in the seventh heaven with happiness. The girl barely restrained so as not to get out of joy. He realized that she would now be able to sleep with him as Dick Makura because his box disappeared. Earlier, the girl supported this idea, revealed the arms and invited him to lie down. Instead, Slime announced that he would sleep under the bed today. Daryl did not understand why he decided so. She tried to persuade the Slim, saying that there could be a ghost under the bed. Instead, Slime claimed that he would overcome that ghost. When Slime peered under the bed, of course, he did not find any ghost and decided that he had already overcome it. However, Slime, looking out from under the bed, told Daryl that the ghost has fled, and now you can be safe under the bed. Despair and upset, Daryl just turned away from the Mucus and went to bed. The Mucus tried to call him to himself, but the girl only jailed. Year in the Mucus world. The next day, Pekon visited the store again to congratulate the guy's Happy New Year. The Mucus greeted her, and she answered him the same. After that, the girl suggested playing badminton and inviting her tiers to join. Pekon noted that badminton's game is a must-have tradition in New Year's Eve. The girl began to explain the rules. They are quite simple. It is necessary to hit the shuttle room with a racket. The one who is the first to miss will lose. The guys did not waste time and started playing right in the store. The Pekon also noted that if the shuttle room falls on this side, the Mucus would get an eye. The Mucus understood everything, and the girl, meanwhile, started the game. Kona sent the roll to the air, causing a powerful blow. He flew so high and far away that the Mucus could only lift his head and look after him. Finally, the swing landed behind the back of the snail. At that moment, John gladly announced that she had received her first score this year. Looking at the dissatisfied Mucus membrane, the girl wondered why he had such a clear face. She assured that she only followed the rules. The Pekon firmly answered that from now on it would not be restrained, and everything would really go. After these words, the girl launched another steering wheel and asked Simon if he had the strength to answer. Simon immediately realized that the stem would fly over his head again and decided to increase his size. Seeing this, the Pekon was stunned. At this point, Slime repelled his own forehead. The collar flew to Pekon. He flew high, and the girl realized that he would not be able to get it. At this point, Daryl suddenly appeared behind Pekona's back. He asked the guys if they were ready for the area. The Pekon turned her gaze on Daryl, and the hamlet fell near her. On the other hand, Kona at that moment stated that the match ended in a draw. This solution was quite upset Mucus. Kona, however, announced that their Mucus duel was over, and it's time to rest. Daryl asked the guys if they wanted to try fashion, to which the Mucus replied that he was seeking. Pekon also stated that she was interested in it, but their dispute did not end there. The next day she visited the store and offered the boys a magical ball to predict the future. It turned out that Mucus and Storks were truly close friends, and it was very pleased with the Mucus. On the other hand, it was noted that the divination from the white magician seemed a little suspicious. Instead, Sharero argued that Daryl was mistaken, because her predictions were extremely accurate. Daryl also noted that their interaction was perfect. However, Daryl did not like it that Sroper did not ask her consent before starting to fence on it. At this point, Mucus suggested that Kororo to check whether he had compatibility with Daryl. Although Daryl had some doubts, she reluctantly agreed with the idea of Mucus. In fact, she was extremely interested in what the result would be. Meanwhile, Sharero decided to do the breeze. The girl noted that the relationship between Mucus and Daryl was medium. She didn't like it. Departing, she stated that divination was only a joke, and it was because of this that the black magicians do not take him seriously. In fact, she was truly upset because she had no Mucus compatibility. Sitting on the edge of the rock, she thought worriedly. Her sadness was so strong because of this disappointment that she did not even notice how Shiraro jumped out of the store and began to call Daryl. Daryl apologized to Shirara and acknowledged that she had lied. Shiraro argued that the mutual understanding between Daryl and Slime exceeds her. The girl confessed that she really just envied Daryl, and the envy forced her to lie. This year, Oro added that she is very sorry. Satisfied, Daryl, on the other hand, rose and with a smile assured that she was not offended at all. It was only a divination. The girl returned to the store, and making sure that Shiroro did not see her, she jumped with joy. Bing and Mucus. One day the Mucus painted himself with Vlad, creating a funny game. He imagined Vlad trying to steal something, but Mucus constantly prevented him from doing so. Despite everything, he was still determined to steal everything in a row. But Mucus applied his special ability against a thief known as a little fire. Thus the villain begins to burn and scream with pain, gradually surrendering. It was at this point that Vlad appeared and asked him to stop, to ask the Mucus to stop using such a strategy. Aline lifted his gaze, recognized the villain, and he said, "Hi." Guy explained that Daryl had to convey something and wondered if she was above. Slime immediately denied, saying that he would not have done so. Vlad tried to explain to Slim that Daryl himself asked him for it, but Slime did not even listen to him and ordered him loudly. Slime stated that he would be forced to attack the authorities if he did not go. Vlad had doubted the words of the Slim, because last time he could not create magic. Now the creature assured that she could. Vlad still remained skeptical, because he had never seen a slime capable of magic before. However, Slime stood firmly on his own, claiming that he was capable of it. Then Vlad asked the Slim to demonstrate the magic, otherwise they would have to call Daryl. At that moment, Slime remembered Daryl's words when she gave him a bench. These words inspired him to fight. Doubting the word little light, Slime aimed his staff at power. It succeeded, and Vlad barely had time to dodge the attack of a Slim. The guy was stunned, realizing that the Slime was really capable of attack. At this point, Claim strongly stated that he would protect the store. At this point, Vlad realized that the situation was critical. He explained that the attacks of the Slim look spectacular, but carelessness can lead to disaster with fire. Looking there, they both saw the counter covering the flames. Most of them had to escape alone. In the evening, the fire was extinguished in the store. Daryl, dissatisfied, holding the mucous membrane in his hands, turned to the authorities who kneel in front of her, asking what to do with the goods now. Vlad only unclearly squeezed the words, and Daryl added that her brother would have to buy all the burned goods and slip. Once Daryl noted that she was getting colder lately, it was a little worried to the girl for her health. So she decided to ask the slug if she was fine with him, to which he answered that he was feeling well. Then she wondered whether the mucous membranes could be ill at all, to which the slug that he had no idea. Daryl suggested that a winter review just in case. He took the mucous membrane for his cheeks and began to check his elasticity again. Subsequently, Daryl stopped touching the mucous membrane because it already looked suspiciously. Instead, the slug wondered if everything was fine with him. Daryl realized that if she answers now, the check would have to be completed, but the girl did not want it at all. They also realized that conducting the same test would look suspicious. However, Daryl did not want to finish the touch of mucus. The girl began to think aloud why the mucus was so soft. She began to pretend that her mucus had revealed something serious, and it scared him. He hurriedly asked her to look at him again. In this case, Daryl again rushed to embrace the mucous membrane. In the end, Daryl asked what had happened. Thinking a little, Daryl happily announced that the mucous membrane is in excellent condition. These words were pleasantly impressed with the mucous membrane, although the girl checked him 100 times and found no problems. Gradually came colder days. The temperature decreased significantly from the outside, and the store also rained cold. Daryl, to warm up, even had to wrap in a blanket. At this point, the mucus entered the room and congratulated the girl on a good morning. Instead, Daryl did not agree with this greeting at all, because in the morning she was not good at all. She was surprised that the mucus did not feel cold. At this point, the mucous membrane reported that he was going for a morning detour for cleaning. Daryl, in turn, detained him. He asked if mucus was really going to go out. The girl noted that for the room it is still normal, but it was very cold on the street, so the mucus should wear winter clothes. The words were surprised in mucus. From his expression, it was clear that he did not have winter clothes. Understanding this, the girl decided to check if she had something suitable for mucus. Extending in her things, she guessed that the Christmas stocking could be useful. The mucus pulled the stocking on his head. Now he felt warm. At that moment, the girl looked at the cute mucus and puzzled, and he did not understand why she was looking at him. At this point, the mucus decided to go to work, but Daryl was in no hurry to let him go. She asked him to stop, noting that his neck could freeze. After a few minutes, Daryl became even more confused, watching this mucus. He was incredibly sweet and already warmly dressed, so he tried to go to work again, but Daryl once again asked the mucus to stop. Carol noted that she needed to check how warm the mucus is, and she hugged it firmly. They embraced for a long time, although the mucus was not quite satisfied with it. Sandwich and mucus. One day Daryl sat again at her desk. The mucus approached her, and the girl apologized and explained that she would soon finish work and prepare something. The mucus had to wait a little. She agreed and began to watch Daryl works. Suddenly, a brilliant thought glowed in his head. The girl noted that this is really a problem, because the neighborhood becomes noisy at night because of zombies and other similar creatures. These words frightened Mucus. To the room on the ground floor to prepare something. Lime remembered Daryl thanked him for cooking. Lime also mentioned the words of Shir that it is very easy to prepare sandwiches. With this thought, Lime decided to make sandwiches for himself and Daryl. Kororo explained the Mucus that you only need to put some food between 2 slices of bread, and the sandwich is ready. Therefore, the Mucus decided to prepare a sandwich with marmalade. Unfortunately, the marmalade ended, which upset the Mucus very much. So, looking at the pieces of bread, Mucus could not understand how to proceed. But suddenly he thinks a great idea. After a while, he approached Daryl again, holding a plate. He noted that he prepared sandwiches for her because she saw that she was busy. Seeing the sandwich, Daryl was pleasantly impressed. Instead, at that moment he stated that he had created a wonderful sandwich. He put bread between 2 slices of bread. Daryl was frozen with surprise and did not even know how to respond to it. We still thanked the snail and decided to taste his sandwich. The girl bit a piece of sandwich with Snail. Snail asked if she liked it, to which the girl replied that the bread had a pleasant night taste, but she still lacks a glass of milk. Salary for Mucus. One day, Daryl decided to finally pay the Mucus salary. Lime was incredibly glad when he saw Daryl stretching his bag and thanked the girl for it. Aim unpaved the bag, waiting to find jelly candy inside, but not a coin. When Slippery expected to see a monolate, but instead found coins, he was not happy. She noticed it and asked what happened to his expression. The girl believed that the mullet should be more joyful, because it was his first salary. However, it seems that Mucus simply did not know what a salary was. Daryl explained that the Mucus made a lot of effort. He sweep the floor, put the goods, and oversee the store, so he deserves a salary. Daryl claims that money is of particular importance when they are earned by hard labor. Therefore, he asks the Mucus membrane to use these coins carefully. The girl also added that she would continue to take care of the Mucus membrane, as he coped well with her responsibilities. Joy Mucus assured that he would continue his efforts. In this case, Daryl wondered what Mucus plans to spend his first salary. The Mucus replied that it would spend all the amount on multicolored candy. It was then that the girl realized that the Mucus did not listen to her words. In this case, Mucus stated that he would acquire a legendary sword for this salary. Daryl decided to slow down his passion. She realized that he did not understand anything at all, because this sword was incredibly expensive. In view of this, the girl suggested that the Mucus membrane go for shopping in the city. Hearing about the city, the Mucus was frozen in the air. As it turned out, he had no opportunity to visit there. The relay told Mucus about many things in the city that he had never seen before. For example, a huge market with smithy and a variety of benches. Mucus, in turn, stated that he wanted to get to the marmalade shop. At this point, Daryl realized that Mucus is only interested in marmalades. Only after Daryl's promise to take Mucus to the city did she think about the possible consequences. The girl unexpectedly realized that other magicians could see her with Mucus. Meanwhile, Mucus was moving fun and persistently to the city, singing a song. On the other hand, it is now confused. After all, there was still a person nearby. Suddenly, the girl realized that the exit was still existing. The girl approached the Mucus and asked if he was fine. The girl advised the Mucus to dress stylishly because he rarely visits the city. The Mucus membrane was very pleased with this idea. He really sought to look stylish. However, the problem was that he still remained Mucus, so he needed a suit. Daryl asked the Mucus to wait a little while she rose up. The girl wanted to use the suit that she sewed. She dressed this outfit, and instantly the Mucus turned into the feet of the entire forest. In the end, looking at the still sweet snail, Daryl realized that all her efforts were in vain. and it is impossible to hide his true essence. She decided that it was better to be seen in the image of this artificially created scary. Instead, Olive asked Daryl at this point if he was looking cool. Daryl replied that slime really seems powerful with those claws. So, the girl decided that now she also needed dressing. Subsequently, she returned to the patient mucous membrane and apologized for the delay. Seeing a new Daryl, the slugged. Now she became the monster. The slug asked the girl why she changed her clothes, to which Daryl replied that this style is now fashionable. Then the girl asked the slug if she looks good, and the slugged squeezed that he did not know it. Walking into mucus. When everything was prepared for the departure, Daryl told Sluzniak that he could go to the city road. But now is not the time. Daryl announced that they would now fly on a broom. The mucous membrane, overflowing with curiosity, asked if it could really take off. Daryl replied that of course, because she was a magician. After that, the girl asked the Slin to remove some things from his backpack, so that they would not fall out or crack. These words scared the Slin, because the backpack behind his back was twice as big as him. After the preparation, the boys were ready to take off. Finally, they climbed into the sky. In a white bucket attached to the broom, mucus was located, and the hero himself sat on this broom. Only in a moment did they climb high above the clouds. The mucus was delighted. He really liked to watch the landscapes from the height of the dragon's flight. At the same time, she just asked the haystack to hold on firmly because she planned to gain speed. Sorry, but I only provide texts in Ukrainian. Can I do anything else for you? He always flew among the clouds and even above them. The whole flight came to the soul. In the end, they soon approached the mountains behind which the city spreads. Unexpectedly, Daryl reported that her magic reserves had exhausted. Hearing this, the mucus stopped with surprise. At the same moment, the boys began to fall down. Suddenly, Daryl quickly moved forward, saying that she only joked. But she did not have time to please the mucus, as there was an obstacle again before him. Mountains to which the boys were very close. The hay-covered panic, and she asked Daryl to lift the plane higher. Rapidly shortening the distance to the mountain, Slim was already sure that the collision was inevitable. Suddenly Daryl changed the course sharply and rose up. In a few seconds, the boys were already shimming in the middle of the city. Alina stared at the wonderful buildings with delight, admiring their architecture. Additionally, on the eve of Pion's Jelovan, she went to the store in the witch hat and wondered if it was sweet or eerie. The girl, although she was fearless, was not really frightened, so she hid behind her broom. But after a moment, freeing himself from fear, she approached him and began to pull his cheeks. The pecan said she would joke over the mucus and return if he does not give her candy. Instead, the mucus was not completely aware of what the pecan wanted from him. She noticed it and asked what happened to his face. The girl explained that today Halloween, and if someone says sweet or ash, you need to choose between a joke or candy. Daryl claimed that thanks to her spell, she had already gained a considerable number of candy. So, the peak decided to ask the pecan, sweet or unpleasant. Kona laughed and noted that in such a suit, like a Slim now, this is not taken into account. Daryl denied that the spell would not work unless the slime was dressed in a suit. However, slime suddenly began to move away. Pecan thought that she had already won this opponent. The girl was convinced that she demonstrated the mucus strength of the fairies, and it was his complete defeat. So the pecan was about to go home to eat candy. But suddenly the slurry called it and ordered it to stop. Turning, the fairy could not believe her own eyes. The mucous membrane, dressed in a hat with a stamp in his hand, again turned to the pecan. Sweet or spicy? Pecan stood, embarrassed, not understanding where such an interesting masquerade clothes came from Molesniak. From the surprise of Tony from her hands, a bag of candy fell. She was extremely ashamed because she won the slippery, but she was still not going to give him candy. With despair, the girl just cried. Finally, she still decided to give the mucus candy. The mucus took a pecanic candy and thanked her, and the girl thoughtfully promised to remember this moment. After the peconas disappeared from the store, the mucus approached Daryl. He immediately asked why the mucus chose such a suit. The girl did not express this aloud, but thought that in this outfit, the mucus looks cute. Instead, Alva explained that he was given candy today when they see him in the image of a sorcerer. At this point, Daryl figured out. She guessed that it was a Hellevan holiday, which was known in the north, and asked the mucus whether he knew about it. To which the mucus replied that he was simply given candy. She thought for a moment and remembered that her mother had to stay. He took out the candy and thought whether to eat it immediately. In the same second, the mucus eyes lit up. It seems that Darrow was not the only one who wanted to try this taste. After that, the girl asked if he knew the magic spell on Halloween. Initially, the mucous membrane hesitated a little. Remembering, he loudly exclaimed the magic words that combined sweetness and joke. In this case, Darrow gave the Slim a necklace that his mother created, and he gladly accepted him, expressing his gratitude to the girl. Meanwhile, the girl suggested a snack, and he gladly agreed. Slime was happy to taste goodness, and Darrow only watched him. The 8th Amylade ate Slime, and Darrow wondered if he liked. Slime confirmed that he liked. The girl then asked if there was a candy slice, to which he replied that he had no candy. In this case, Darrow asked for a Slim whether he was sweet or treacherous, and then asked for chocolates. It was angered by a Slim because he had no candy at all. This is exactly what Darrow sought for. Slime showed a joke, and Darrow rushed to him with his arms. Only after a while, the Slim became clear that Darrow could not ask for tenderness or a friendly gesture. After all, she was without a suit, and the spell would not work. However, the girl was just reminded that she was a magician. Subsequently, Slime went to the school where Darrow taught, and Vlad was his classmate. During one of the lessons, Darrow asked the students who wanted to solve the example. Slime, when he heard this question, immediately expressed his desire to test his hand in solving. Hardly moving the pages of the book, he confessed that he did not know the solution. So Darrow wondered why the Slim raised her hand. The heroine also decided to give a Slim a little hint. This task was yesterday's homework. However, Slime gladly confessed that he did not fulfill it. Then Darrow asked Slim why he did not do his homework, to which Slime again cheerfully replied that he could not read the letters. Darrow's jaw dropped from this confession. In the end, she praised the Slim for his sincerity. Then the girl asked the authorities if she could solve this example, to which Vlad confidently replied that he was under the power. He rose from the chair and looked at the textbook. After that, the guy scratched his head and confessed that he could not disassemble these characters. These words were very annoyed by Darrow. The girl asked if Vlad had forgotten about yesterday's homework, to which Vlad, with fear, replied that he did not perform it. These words were even more angry with Darrow. Finally, Vlad was behind the door because he did not do his homework. So, let's return to the time when Darrow and Slime first went to the city. Going with Darrow to the market playground, Slime could not stop wondering how many people gathered there. He ran to every passerby, greeting all in a row. Suddenly, Slime came to a sweet girl with her ears. Slime was interested in the girl's claws, so she made a compliment. The girl thanked him and praised his own claws in response. It was at this moment that Darrow, who hurried after him, caught up. She explained that his exclamations were interfered with others, and it is worthwhile to keep the conversation in the girl's skill. Slime just apologized to her. Suddenly he felt a delicious aroma. Looking back, the Slime noticed the counter, from which the delicious smell was leaving. Without long hesitation, the Slippery made his way to the counter and turned to the seller. The seller was welcomed what could be useful. Then the seller asked if the Mucus would eat here or took food with him. This issue stunned Mucus. Without answering the question, the Mucus simply ordered 10 skewers. At this point, Darrow approached the store and turned to him, asking, does he not understand what to bring with him? Darrow also explained that it is not necessary to buy 10 at once, because they can just not like it. This made Mucus understand that Darrow is absolutely right. After that, Darrow asked the seller to give them 2 skewers to them. The seller gave the boys skewers, and they went on to walk the city. Darrow decided to explain to the Slurry that if he continues to spend money, then one day will remain without the necessary amount for an important purchase. The Slug realized and promised to be careful in the future. Looking at the burning kebabs, there are doubts in the head of the Slug. The puzzled mucous membrane decided to ask Darryl if you can eat barbecue. However, Darryl noted that they would worry if they start eating on the go. So the girl suggested more comfortable to place on a bench for the meal. So they did. Darryl tasted slowly, stretching pleasure, and the mucous membrane devoured all the meat in a moment. He is extremely liked by this kind of food. When he realized that the meat was gone, he was even a little upset. Darryl noticed this and decided to offer her skewers. The mucous membrane hesitated and asked Darryl that she would eat. The girl replied that she was not hungry. In this case, the cheerful mucous membrane was taken from the girl with meat and began to be treated. Slut was pleased to enjoy the meat when Darryl asked where they were going on. The mucus replied that they would certainly go to a normal age store. Darryl was a little surprised because the Slurry still wanted to go to the jelly store, even after ate 2 meat skewers, sweet shop and souvenir shop. After a while, The boys finally reached the store that had a variety of jelly candy. Seeing this, the mucus was in the seventh sky with happiness. He looked at the candy and could not believe that all this was going on with him. In this case, he took a basket of chocolates and solemnly proclaimed, "This is the final decision." At this point, the heroine approached the mucus and asked, "What else did you decide?" She has already begun to guess that mucus plans to spend all the money again. Instead, Alive saw nothing wrong with this. It seemed to him that these sweets were not going to disappear from the shelves. Daryl, however, had a different opinion and asked Simon to look into his wallet. Lime did so. In his wallet, he found only one coin. However, Daryl explained that Lime could spend this money only here. Lime was stunned, because one coin would be enough only on a large lollipop. However, Daryl offered him to buy 3 small lollipops instead, which would cost the same. Carol advised the Slin to think before buying, because he made this money hard work. Slime felt a little cheated and delved into thinking about his choice. Considering a variety of lollipops, the sad Slurry could not decide between the big and the small. It has passed a lot of time, and the Slurry was still thinking, squeezing his head from tension. Suddenly, his head rose to smoke. Daryl noticed it and asked the slug what had happened, but he stood fascinated and silent. She came to the slug and touched it with her finger. At the same moment, the mucous membrane, as if restarted, woke up. Sweet shop and a shot with slugs. After visiting the sweet store, the boys decided to stroll through the city a little more. While Daryl was captured by a showcase with toys, which so attacked her attention, the mucous membrane noticed a weapon shop. Without thinking for a long time, a joyful Slurry flew into the weapon store and began to look carefully at all. Slum enthusiastically considered the huge variety of goods around. Suddenly, the seller turned to him, asking a little to slow down his pace. Instead of turning to the mucus, the seller called him a pseudo-med-medical and advised to return home if he came only for curiosity. Aline realized what the seller hinted at, so he pulled out his wallet and showed him. The seller understood his mistake and apologized to the Slim for his rudeness. Then Slime asked if the seller could help him as a client. Slime approached the seller and wondered if they had a legendary weapon. The seller replied that the Slim was lucky. They had several such legendary samples. These words captured the Slim. The seller simultaneously pulled out some short saber and stated that it was a legendary star sword. He claimed that this sword broke after he was cut by the star. These words simply struck the interested Slim. Taking the sword, he began to consider him enthusiastically. At this point, the seller decided to sell another brilliant accessory. He found a special legendary shield that once saved the city from a falling meteorite. Seeing this shield, Slime was extremely impressed. His eyes shone when he realized that he was eager to get a legendary sword and an unsurpassed shield. The seller showed his acting skills when the Slurry lifted the shield to see him. He was as surprised that he could not believe that the mucous membrane could hold both the legendary sword and the shield. The seller asked the slug if he was accidentally a legendary star warrior. Hearing these words, the slug proudly straightened. The seller assured that his eyes were not mistaken. These things were indeed valuable, and he was ready to give them to a discount. The Slurry thanked the seller and stated that he would buy everything. These vowels came to Daryl, and she rushed to the weapon store. She tried to stop the mucous membrane and remind him not to buy it without supervision, but the mucous membrane was ready for purchase. They all had cheap junk, but argued that the legendary equipment was worn. Shop and Slime. Slime tried to convince Daryl that he had a star sword in his hands, which he could cut the dawn. However, Daryl was sure that it was a waste of money. Therefore, the girl asked the Slim to return this unnecessary. This is how Daryl returned the Slim's gear. She advised him to visit other stores in the future and compare the goods. The guys did so. Walking through the street, Daryl hoped to find something useful. Suddenly, the girl again paid attention to the shelf with toys. She noted that the store was looking good, and suggested that everyone enter. When the boys came inside, Daryl was delighted. The toy store was exactly what she lacked. Suddenly, the girl stopped her gaze on one of the toys. Just a teddy bear, so Daryl thought, looking at him. The toy seemed to be pleased to buy her. The girl realized that she wanted this toy but could not buy it until the mucous membrane, because it would have spoiled her image of a dark magician. Daryl realized that she would be very upset if someone else purchases this toy. In this case, she began to consider her further actions. She confidently came to the toy, grabbed it, and decided to outwit the mucus to buy the desired thing later. At that moment, the mucus stood side by side and looked closely at the toy where Daryl Cattle was. Daryl noted it and asked the mucus that had happened to his face. The girl explained that she needed this toy for a ritual. Mucus, on the contrary, considered it a waste of money, and his sword Daryl completely considered a thing unnecessary. Meanwhile, Daryl was amazed at how quickly the Mucus solved her plan. So she decided to choose a different approach. She noted that this toy was needed for magical research, and suggested that the mucus membrane choose a toy instead of a sword. The girl realized that it was a good plan because she would not have two whole toys. Aliev persistently defended his position, claiming that the star's sword is legendary and cannot be replaced with nothing else. In such a situation, Daryl broke into patience, and he returned to the arsenal to pick up this slippery star of the star, snack in the city. When Daryl and Mucus were wandered through the streets, it was already noon. The girl, meanwhile, remembered that they were the only thing they fed were meat barbecues, as well as a lollipop that kept Mucus at that moment. Despite this, Darrow did not feel famine. At the same time, the stomach of the Mucus was vomiting loudly. Mucus stated that he was very hungry. In this case, Darrow had nothing left to feed him. Therefore, the boys went to the traveling Mandragora cafe. They were already sitting at the table and began to view the menu. Daryl asked Slusniak if he decided on his choice. The slugged cheerfully replied that yes. Then Daryl decided to order food and called the waiter. The girl came to the table and Daryl ordered a comprehensive lunch of the day and soup. At this point, Slusniak asked Daryl what a complex lunch was. Daryl explained that this is a special offer. In this case, the mucus membrane decided to order a complex set of hamburgers, fried shrimp, omelet, rice, steak, and ice cream. Realizing that mucus can be spoiled by excess choice, I asked it to choose only one dish, because it is unlikely to eat more. These words were angry. He clearly sought to taste more. He did not object to Daryl, looked at the menu again and thought. Suddenly his attention was attracted by the next table. Uncle sat on the next table. Slime suddenly popped his finger and noted that he was eating something extremely appetizing. Daryl quickly cast his gaze on the food on the next table and saw a gorgeous dish. The girl immediately thought about the fact that, in this case, Daryl decided to advise the mucus to make a choice not to overpay. The mucus looked carefully at the menu and pointed to one of the dishes. The girl explained that she includes a hamburger, fried shrimp, and omelet. This combination was obviously interested in mucus. Despite the hesitation, he still decided to take the dish offered by Daryl. The waiter accepted the order and went to the kitchen. She soon returned with the order. Children's lunch with eggs, shrimp, and hamburger was presented SLYM. Alan, considering his dish, decided to share his joy with Daryl. He asked the girl to pay attention that there is a hamburger and fried shrimp in his plate, as well as a small box. In this case, the mucus decided not to waste time and immediately began to eat. He roared loudly, enjoying his dish, and Derry only asked him not to choke. Majiro. One day, while the boys were still in the city, Daryl remembered that she needed mandrake's seeds. I suspect that there was a problem in their store, so it was very scared. But Daryl hastened to reassure him and explain that everything was really good. Having thought a little, Daryl remembered that seeds were sold only in a magic shop, and therefore there is a high probability to meet a sorcerer there. The girl was aware that she was twisting herself, but could not stop. Subsequently, Slime and Daryl's come to a large store. At this point, the store had a girl who made an order. She ordered 4 books in magic, a fireplace, and 1 spider. The man at the cash desk reported that because of the error with the order, they have a lot of keychains. So he suggested that the girl take the keychain if she liked. The girl asked the cashier to stop joke. He argued that she was a dark magician and could not strive for such jewelry. Before the man, a demon of dark magic named Errol actually stood. Cheryl stated that dark magicians were loved by skulls, mummies, and other spooky things, and now the client that stood in front of her had to know it if he was working in a magic shop. Yerrol asked what was interested in the skulls, to which the man replied that there was no skulls in their store. At this point, a joyful and enthusiastic mucus membrane flew into the store, immediately attracting attention. She was amazed at how larger this store is compared to Daryl's store. However, Daryl himself, running through, asked her to stop and not to vote. Daryl tried to explain to the slugs that she would just buy seeds, they would go further, and he would have to wait a little aside. At that moment, Cheryl, who was standing near the cashier nearby, as if heard a familiar voice of Daryl. Daryl ran to the cashier and asked the seller to give her the seeds of mandrakes as soon as possible. The seller gave the girl seeds and gave her a keychain as a gift. The keychain was so sweet that the girl immediately fell in love with him. At first, she could not believe that it could be obtained for free. However, The seller assured that Daryl could really take him, because he was accidentally sent to many such keychains. At this point, Ural, who initially tried to hide under his hat, when Daryl came closer, finally spoke. She noted that she had recognized someone's voice. Hearing this, Daryl turned and seemed to be recognized by Zeril. Daryl, having passed her cheek, asked why she was so dressed. It was obvious that these two dark magicians were familiar. Mage watched Daryl closely. She could not get involved, as it was possible that Daryl had changed beyond recognition. Because of this, she asked how Daryl's business, and whether she was afraid of insects. At that moment, Daryl realized that she came across a person with whom it was difficult for her to find a common language. She immediately decided to leave the store. However, at this point, a slime approached her and asked who his mistress communicated with. Daryl replied that she had never met with Yarrow before. This girl just started a conversation with her. Yarrow was not satisfied with such a response by Daryl. The girl introduced herself, saying that they were with Daryl, a girlfriend of childhood. It surprised Yarrow, and she became interested in why Slime called Daryl with her mistress and where he knew her. Slime replied that he was working in Daryl's store, and it was at that moment that Daryl tried to stop the Slim, but silence prevailed. When Slime reached Daryl, she exclaimed enthusiastically, "It's incredible! He has never heard of dark magicians who would hire Slim." Yaru began to laugh with Daryl for led to the city undercover. At this point, Daryl began to tremble with shame. Yarrow tried to remedy the situation, claiming that she just hired a Slim to help cool the store. However, Yarrow clearly did not like this justification. Then Daryl turned to her acquaintance, wondering whether she improved her magical abilities. Daryl hesitated a little after the question. She confessed that she was able to do most, but they still failed. At that moment, Daryl took the Book of Magic, which Yarrow purchased, and decided to look at her. Harold, however, just clutched his eyes, trying to stop it, but was too late. Dart looked at the cover of the book and realized that this edition for beginners, intended for children. Turning the book on the shelf mysteriously, Dart turned to Yarrow and exclaimed happily, "It's incredible!" Daryl asked Gerald if she still needed a book for beginners. Not wanting to answer the question, Jeer just asked Daryl to silence. Daryl stated that she was very angry and was about to tell the elders that he hired Mucus. In this case, Daryl replied that he would tell everyone who still studies a book for beginners and needs help in learning. Instead, Daryl argued that a dark magician, which has weakness towards lovely things, would not be able to teach it anything. However, he immediately denied his words, saying that she really didn't like cute things. Someone then reminded Daryl how she almost took the keychain as a gift. Daryl replied that it was a rare magical object, and only a fool would not see it. While the girls argued, the Mucus was already yawning. Mark Magiero. After this case, two dark magicians and Mucus continued to wander the city. Ural told how a huge spider appeared for a long time, and she, being a dark magan, grabbed him with her hands. On the other hand, she considered this whole story disgusting. Dorella, these words were not liked. She decided to remind Doral how she dealt with pests at the magic school. He, in turn, assured that it was the reason why she allowed him to write off his homework, so they were touched. In addition, Daryl stated that she was no longer afraid of insects and overcame her fear. Hearing this, Arav decided to check this information. She deliberately lagged behind Daryl and Mucus to tell him about the cockroach on her back. In these words, Daryl shuddered and screamed loudly. The girl apologized, assuring that it was only her imagination. Daryl decided to find out in Yarrow what happened to her and why she was following them. To which Yarrow, a smile, replied that Daryl Perrineau. She just returned home. In this case, Daryl asked Yarrow where her broom. Yarrow pulled her broom out of her back, and Daryl was surprised that his friend had a complex broom. It was at this point that Daryl guessed that Yarrow just wanted to tease him, and now he was going to go. Indeed, she announced her departure. As it turned out, Jerol went to Guy Station. The girl did not stop thinking for a moment. How well it turned out that she left Delilah. Now it seemed as if she had gained the top over him. Carol also dreamed that next time she could fly on her broom. At the same moment, the speaker announced the departure of the bus. Hearing this, Jeraid was about to enter the bus, aiming to defeat Daryl. At this point, Daryl was surprised and slugged from the horn, looking closely at Yarrow. Daryl almost entered the bus. He called a friend, calling to be careful while traveling. After that, the Mucus said goodbye to ERL, leaving the girl of the ward with shame. Williams and Mucus workshop. At this point, Daryl and Mucus were in no hurry to leave the city. After Ariel left, Daryl glanced at the city's clock and wondered how long they spent. In the meantime, the girl purchased everything necessary, so she decided to ask the mucus if he took what he needed. The mucus happily replied that he received everything he wants. It turned out that the mucus wanted the most chocolates, although he bought some things unnecessarily. Savings are more important than everything else. At this point, the boys passed by a shop that attracted the attention of a joyful mucus. The mucus, comfortably shouting, rushed to the store, leaving Daryl in full surprise. Despite the fact that they were already in the store, Slizachalk began to inspect his contents. There were various works everywhere. The mucus gaze was attracted by small gollets, puppets, driven by magic. Snails became interested in them and asked Daryl if one of the robots could be managed. Daryl replied that it was possible if the robot is small. The girl asked the mucus if he wanted to try and gave him a staff. Daryl asked the mucus membrane to focus the same as he did with magic. A little fire and stamp. The slurry understood everything. He took the staff and began to concentrate. And having waved the staff, he activated the robots, and they opened. All are surprised, the robot began to move. The enchanted and enthusiastic mucus told his mistress that the robot had started to move. He could not believe that the truth was controlled. In the meantime, Daryl asked the mucus to force the work to do something specific, and mucus politely turned to work to wave his hand. The robot obediently fulfilled the request and then reached out to the mucus. In delight, the mucus shook his hand and, turning to Daryl, resolutely stated that he was going to buy this golden one. In this case, Daryl asked himself whether mucus could buy this golem. These words caught mucus by surprise. Daryl realized that he would not be able to buy a golem, and suddenly felt sadness. Watching the upset mucus, Daryl wanted to pick up this golem. But the girl realized that even such a small goal was worth a considerable amount. Carol also dreamed of how great it would be to create a golem, but she did not have the right skills. Suddenly, the door was squeak at the box office, and the owner of the robot shop, an old man, appeared. He suggested that young people make a golem of used materials, and assured that in this case the cost of work would be low. Tight workshop and mucus. The mucus was fascinated by the proposal of the old master. He was very pleased with the opportunity to create a golem from unnecessary. However, Daryl asked him to calm down a little. Carol asked Molesniak if everything would be fine, because it would cost him most of the money. Slips, however, argued that this is not a problem. At the same time, Daryl realized that even if the robot consists of unnecessary, the money of the mucus membrane may not be enough. Moreover, Daryl has suspected old store owner. At this point, the old man noticed that it would be great for him if the boys had purchased this job. However, he added that he could not guarantee the reliable work of the golem. At that moment, Daryl realized that her suspicions were unfounded. His words were forced to shine the eyes of the sludge even brighter. Daryl, looking at him, realized that it would be impossible to refuse now, so she decided to agree. Then the old man invited the slug to his workshop. When an old man was already going to close the door behind him, Daryl asked if he could go inside too. The girl just wanted to learn how to create these goals. However, the old man refused, explaining that he would have lost his job if Daryl learned to do them. It upset the girl a little, but she realized that such an answer was quite predictable. The old man brought mucus into the workshop. The mucus was enthusiastically looked around, at the same time surprised to rejoice in it. Having pulled the purse with sweets, the mucus pulled her to the old man as if it were money. The old man, smiling, asked if the money was earned, which the mucus answered in the affirmative. The old man smiled and decided to accept what his mucus was. After all, it was his honestly earned money. After that, the old man decided to start the case. He planted mucus near the table and explained that the magic clay should be started. Then he asked the mucus to imagine the golem that he wanted to create. Mucus returned to the old man and asked if he could work with him. To which the old man replied that the goal was capable of everything. We only need to teach him it. After some manipulations with clay, the mucus stated that he had done everything he could. The old man looked at the creation of mucus and offered his help. The mucus did not deny, and his grandfather praised him, noting that this clay would come out a wonderful goal. Soon, the mucus went to the shop where he was already expected. Seeing the snail, the Darrow immediately began to ask how everything was gone and whether he managed. Saul, without hiding in words, simply demonstrated him a new golem. Looking at such a beautiful golem, it was hard to believe that it was made of scrap. After all, the robot looked as if it were designed from quality parts. At this time, his grandfather returned to the store. Daryl decided to ask his grandfather about the money, to which he replied that the mucus gave him the exact amount he needed. In this case, Daryl sincerely thanked her grandfather and asked the mucus to give her gratitude. Satisfied, mucus with the golem in his hands and a wide smile on his face turned to the old man and expressed his sincere gratitude. The old man smiled and also thanked the boys for taking responsibility for the golem. An exciting journey ended in the mucus country. In the end, the boys returned to Gai Station. Daryl said she was a little tired, so she could not use her broom for flight. Already sitting on the bus in front of the mucus, Daryl asked him if he liked the hike for shopping. Mucus replied that it was a great pleasure from this. The mucus swayed in front of the girl with his candy, and Daryl asked if he took the souvenirs, to which the mucus answered that he had taken everything he needed. Having looked at his bag, the mucus said he had grabbed several souvenirs for Midza and Shiro. Daryl wondered if the mucus had taken the souvenir for the villain. At that moment, the mucus realized with horror that he had forgotten to take a souvenir for the villain. Sorry. Lowering his head, Mucus acknowledged that he simply did not think of the villain. Suddenly, the mucus glowed with a brilliant idea. Having pulled the flag from the children's lunch, Mucus stated that he would give it a villain. Having removed the souvenir sword in the form of a star, Mucus stated that he would protect the store with his help. However, they warned the mucus that it is dangerous to wave the sword so and should be kept in the vagina. The mucus was a little upset, but still put the sword back into the case. In the meantime, someone asked, "What about Golem?" The mood of Mucus has immediately improved. He replied that the goal became the most interesting part of today. He believed that with the help of his golem, it would be more useful for the mistress.